And now on to our next panel. We're excited to once again have two great experts and experienced association leaders joining us to talk about their segments of the marketplace. And as we did with their first panel, our goal is to showcase our industry partners and allow them to share their insights. Our goal is to provide actionable industry intel to help you make better business decisions. So Jay, welcome back to moderate this next session and to introduce our panelists.
Great, thanks, Ned. So earlier we heard about the current and future trends in the siding and pipe sectors. So in our final session of the day, we have with us leaders of the Printing and Flooring Associations to learn more about what's happening in their industries. First up is Dean Thompson. Dean, hard to believe, but he's in his 14th year as president of RFCI. His career spans over 50 years in the flooring industry, including 5 years at Armstrong and 37 years in a variety of executive capacities at Milliken and Company. So Dean, I will turn over the presentation to you.
Very good. It's my pleasure to join this group this afternoon. And what I really want to do is share with you a little bit today some information basically related to the very, very significant growth in the flooring sector that I'm responsible for, and also share with you a couple pieces of our strategy related to how we're going to help maintain this growth going forward. You know, one thing about with significant added growth also comes added responsibility to make sure that we are staying in control of our message and that we make sure that we're able to withstand the challenges that are being thrown at us from competing sectors with whom we've taken market share, and also be able to fend off entities that continue to challenge PVC, which is our most essential raw material. So with that, I'll move to my second slide, which will show you talks about the growth of the industry. And essentially what I will share with you there is the overall flooring industry has been fairly robust. It's gotten way out of the recession from 2008, and it's now approximately a 27 or 28 billion dollar industry. And shifting to my next slide, you'll see how the resilient flooring sector stacks up for that. Resilient flooring basically consists of vinyl flooring, which is over 94% of the market, and rubber flooring, linoleum, cork, and a few other things. But as this chart will show you, from 2007 roughly, we were about $2.3 billion, about 9% of the market, to this past year, we bumped into $7 billion and about 25% of the market. So really, really great growth. And as the next slide will show you, that growth has really come for the most part from one category of flooring called luxury vinyl tile. If you look at this chart, you'll see all the other product sectors, and luxury vinyl tile over the last 4 or 5 years has been the category of growth for the overall industry, where most sectors have shown some decline. We have some significant growth of nearly 30% over that period of time. Moving on, I'll share with you basically how we stack up in terms of where do we sell and how do we sell that. Basically, our business is pretty much fundamentally split between the commercial market and the residential sector. So one of the key things we have to focus on in today's market is where we put our time and energy, and how do we focus ourselves in being able to do that. And as I'll show you next, on the next slide, it will show you exactly why we're seeing some challenges on the commercial side. You'll see there the relative growth or lack of growth in the commercial sector. In total commercial, you'll see the decline in that market that's forecasted for 2021 and on into 2020 and on into 2021. So we're not seeing any growth whatsoever in the commercial sector. On the other hand, as the next slide will show you, in the housing market, even with the pandemic, housing market, as you heard this from Kate a while ago, and the vinyl siding side has continued to grow nicely, both in the multifamily and single family side of things. So we certainly see in today's market and what we're doing today that the emphasis on where we're all going to be in housing And the next slide will show you a little bit about how that growth is taking place, because basically you'll see that from the standpoint of growth at the age group of 65 and over is really a big contributor to how the housing market is going, moving ahead. And then on the next slide, I'd like to share with you a little bit about some of the factors that relate to the longer term changes and things, especially focused on the pandemic. And you heard from Eric Anderson at Halstead a few minutes ago, and he was talking about flooring and did a really, really nice job, by the way. But one of the key things I've highlighted there, in yellow, which is no surprise, is the growing concern with the healthy home environment. So that's obviously an area where we will have to determine how to best focus our time and energy in order to capitalize on that. And I should tell you that I'll just digress for a minute here. Going back to 2019, early on, we had done some strategic research and working to understand going forward, and as much as we have had all this significant growth, how can we position ourselves going forward to continue? And so through our strategic efforts, really decided that there were a couple of areas where we really need to focus our time and energy. One is on how we promote the category, and the other one is in the area of education. And the trick is in promoting the category, we're a trade organization. So the trade organization and manufacturers have to determine how to approach this idea in a way that has synergy, so that the investment that RFCI would make in something like this would be an investment that our flooring manufacturers could take advantage of. So we have done some really good work in that area. And one of the things we've done to, as you'll see on the next slide, is to shore up ourselves relative to where we are on healthy environment. We, for a long time, have had the preeminent indoor air quality certification program known as FloorScore. FloorScore today is indoor air quality certification. It covers a broad gamut of hard surface flooring products. And as the demands in the marketplace have grown, we have now introduced our second certification program called Assure Certified, which applies to another category of flooring. And it also deals with not only indoor air quality, but some of the other issues like eliminating orthophthalates, moving away from heavy metals, and those kinds of things. And then a third certification program that we're working on as well. So we need to provide the tools to the market that allows them to capitalize on this desire for healthy environments. And indoor air quality is, by the way, a very big component of that. On the next slide, I'll kind of share with you a little bit also strategically where we felt like we needed to focus some time, and where we are making significant investment is in the area of continuing education, primarily on the architectural and design side. One of the things that we've learned, our technical director is Jane Rohde, who's a practicing architect and very much in tune with what's going on in the architectural and design community. And as Jane likes to say, there's been a real brain drain on the material science side out in the marketplace. So young people today are not getting those material science, that material science background that they used to get. So it's falling more on those of us as manufacturers to do that. And we are taking ownership for that. And working with Jane has developed a very effective continuing education program on resilient flooring and materiality. And that's something that's just being launched. So we think that'll kind of help drive that side of it. But then the next slide, I want to highlight a little bit of what we're doing in terms of how can, back to my point earlier, is how can we do something that would allow the organization's investment also to be leveraged out at our manufacturing level. So we got engaged toward the end of 2019 with a group called the Shelton Group. The Shelton Group has great expertise in sustainability, strategic sustainability, communication. And we work together with them because it's pretty compelling when you look across all of our manufacturers, what we're doing from a sustainability perspective. One of the keys, though, is to be able to capitalize on bringing all of that together and being able to market that in a way that makes some sense to the market. So as a result of that, we have developed a new campaign that we're getting ready to launch. In fact, after this meeting, I'm having a launch meeting with some of our folks to launch a whole new effort called Beautifully Responsible. And Beautiful Responsible will have three supporting elements to it. One of them will be called Mindful Manufacturing, which has all to do with what our manufacturers are doing from a sustainability perspective. The second one has to do with the title we're giving it is called Made for Life, how our products are made for a lifetime of sustainability. And then the third one has to do is called Living Well, which has to do more with health and home health. So that whole campaign we have now put together, and it's really clear to us, as I said earlier at the outset of my presentation, that we need to control our message in the marketplace. And today, if you're not engaged in social media in a really, really aggressive way, you're not in control of your message. Others on social media can quickly get leverage. So we are making a significant investment over the next several months to do that. Beautifully Responsible will exist in the market as a microsite. And then through social media, we'll be driving consumers to that site, which then connects into our member site as well. So the next slide will kind of show you some of the elements of that, all about the product performance, sustainability, and well-being. And we put these materials together in a way so that our manufacturers can capitalize on those and integrate those into their own materials. So as I mentioned earlier, as the next slide will show, there has to be some engagement and awareness out there in the marketplace across a segment of things that we're going to do, all centered around this microsite that we're developing and a whole series of social media impacts that we'll be driving in the marketplace. And then as the next slide will show you, it's really key that this plan, as I mentioned earlier, has synergy. There's really strong benefits for the industry and strong benefits for the membership. The benefits for the industry is that all of us together will be driving home this beautifully responsible idea. This was put together by a strategic marketing committee membership from our membership. And so they have all bought into this because they helped create it. So they will be leveraging this whole campaign in their own materials. So it'll also help them as they continue to advance their own sustainability efforts. So those are some of the things that we're doing to help kind of drive our segment forward. It's the whole Beautifully Responsible and then the educational component. And then I'll just close my comments by saying that there are always a lot of other things we're working on. For example, advocacy is a huge part of what we work on. As you heard Kate say earlier, we have some really key state initiatives. Today, for the last 3 days, I've been totally immersed in working on an initiative involving an executive order in the state of New York, where basically they're trying to launch a flooring specification that prohibits the use of PVC-based vinyl flooring. So obviously that's something we're working really hard on. We also have a new program in the state of Washington, Safer Products for the state of Washington, and there we're working as well. Fortunately, we've been proactive in the vinyl flooring side by moving away from orthophthalates in our category, which has really given us a leg up. So we've got a lot of good things going on there. So in a nutshell, that's a little bit what's going on the resilient flooring sector. So thank you for your interest, and I'll be happy to weigh in on any questions a bit later, but I will turn it back to our good folks at the VI and the Vinyl Sustainability Council. Thanks, Jay.
Great, thank you, Dean. You know, the RFCI has done just such a great job in its marketing programs. I really think there's something for all of us to learn and borrow from in what you're doing. So thank you for sharing that. Our next speaker is Marci Kinter, Vice President for Government and Regulatory Affairs for the Printing United Alliance. Marci oversees the development of resources for the association addressing environmental, safety, and health and sustainability issues. She represents the printing industry as well as their associated supplier base before federal, state, and regulatory agencies on environmental safety and government issues. So welcome, Marci, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, but somebody needs to, there we go. Oh, here I am. So thank you. So I'm really excited today to be here to talk to you a little bit about trends and taking a look into the crystal ball for the printing industry. And I think as with all other industry sectors, we saw that the printing industry was heavily impacted by the pandemic, COVID-19. So looking into my crystal ball, next slide, please. We start to, I want to take a look at three basic areas. One, business. What is our industry going to look like? What does it look like now? What happened to it during the pandemic? And where do we see it moving forward? It's easy to say that we did have quite a bit of a heavy impact, even though printing in a lot of states was definitely deemed an essential business. We're going to take a look at extended producer responsibility. That is, from our perspective, the big elephant in the room right now, as states consider to continue to grapple with what goes on within the extended producer responsibility state legislative arena, and how is that going to impact the printing industry. And then, as much as we can, with the new administration coming in, take a quick look at the regulatory landscape and what we think is going to happen. And this is all under the banner of what the heck is going to happen with COVID-19. What is going to happen? Are we going to have a vaccine? Is it going to be available? And I think all of this flows into this discussion. So in my next slide, we're going to take just a little bit of look on business. So I will say that at the end of 2019, we were having a banner year. It was a very strong year. Our economic research shows that 86% of the industry was showing strong growth. We were moving. They were looking at attributing this to efficiencies in the workplace, automation, addition of new technologies. We were just really starting to move. And in first quarter of 2020, we continued to see this strong growth up until the pandemic in March. And so one of the things that the Printing United Alliance started to do was to do, as with other trade associations, to do economic check-ins. How is the industry doing? So we issued a report in May, and it covered from mid-March, which was the beginning of the true beginning of the shutdown of a lot of businesses within the states, through April. And we saw that sales declined by 53% across the board. And this was specifically and hard hit by the graphic and sign industry at 52% and commercial print market by 57%, because a lot of this had to do with the printed matter. A lot of this had to do with our trade shows. We really were hit hard within the print sector. But what's interesting is within the packaging sector, we only saw a decrease of 15%. And that's important to realize, because the print industry is so diverse and there's so many different segments that we are representing, that because packaging was early on deemed to be essential because of pharmaceuticals, because of all these other areas within the industry that where packaging is truly a key component, we did not see that this industry was as dramatically hit economically. But then as you go to our next slide, we are starting to see that there are shining moments. We did see that the key word and the key attribute for the industry was pivot. And I think we saw that really when we started looking at what businesses were doing to pivot to provide those products necessary for the pandemic, the face shields, the face masks, and it continues to grow. So what we found, which was interesting, is that when we did another survey in early May and June, we saw that 48% of the companies indicated that they expected business to improve. So now we're looking at May and June versus March and April, and we're starting to see that there's optimism again within the industry. Now, we just released a report in October, and it says that it was an interesting statistic, sorry guys, that 50% of sales was attributed to COVID products. COVID products. So you're looking at those that were able to pivot to provide the signage and graphics. I mean, you cannot go into a grocery store without seeing the floor graphics, without seeing the decals 6 feet apart, without seeing the arrows telling you which way to go within the without seeing the arrows which way to go on the grocery store aisles, without seeing those big, heavy barriers coming down between you and the checkout people. You look at all the signage that has been created, all of the graduation signs that were created as a result of the shutdown of the ceremonies. All of that moved into the printing market, obviously. We had banners, we had billboards. Schools are starting to contact the printers more and more as the school systems are opening around the country. They need floor graphics, they need signage. Everyone is looking to how can they effectively communicate to the customer base, the retail base, as well as the stakeholder group as to what to do to maintain safe and healthy workplaces. So we really did see that pivot happened, and we are starting to see that the companies are picking up, that there's more optimism. Now, trade shows and in-person meetings, as indicated through the Vinyl Institute's Vinyl360 conference, are still moving more to a virtual platform, but we are starting to see that hopefully by next fall, we might be able to actually meet in person. So, but it's interesting because we still see that there are shifts and trends. And if you go to my next slide, what we're starting to see are some of these true, what we call mega trends that we don't really think are going to go away. If you start looking at all the graphics for the vehicles that are out there, that is a really key market space right now. You have DoorDash, you have Grubhub, you have, Uber Eats, and then you have all the restaurants that are now delivering that never delivered before, and they want to have that marketing on the side of their delivery vehicles or some sort of signage that's maybe even just a magnetic sign, again, all printed, that is going to identify that, hey, we're out here, we're alive, we're delivering food. So we start to see that those graphics are still very much a strong impetus for the increased sales within our market space. Home office environment. I mean, I don't have one, but I noticed, Jay and Ned have, Vinyl Institute behind you. And we're starting to see that banners for a home office environment are starting to make a really strong resurgence, because people don't want to see, like you see behind me, the picture and the door. You want to have that professional setting. And as we continue into this remote working environment, and as the remote working environment continues, we really do believe we're going to start to see more of a market space for those home office environment banners that create that professional environment. We also see more and more, because there's such a focus on sanitation, branded hand sanitizers. I mean, I can't walk into a store withoand having hand sanitizer right there. And they've moved from just providing the big jugs of sanitizer on their counters to hand sanitizer machines. And now we're starting to see that they want to brand them. They want you to remember that as you walk into your grocery store or into, some other retail setting or into an office, that they are concerned for your safety. And how do they do that? They brand it. Again, we're starting to look at that as a true new market space for the printing industry. And then we do see that touchless retail is coming. I mean, you can't escape the fact that Amazon has just quadrupled. If you look at what's going on, I think I heard somewhere Home Depot and Lowe's is having their best years ever because everyone is focused on home improvement. So I think when you look at touchless retail and you look at the ability to go in and scan a device or scan your phone, for instance, personally, I do have a Wegmans. So I went in and they had literally taken out rows of in-person cashiers and put in at least 5 more rows of self-checkout machines. They introduced an app that you can then go and scan your food items. And then when you get to the counter, you scan, and you never have to talk to a person. You never have to interact with a person. And it really is that touchless retail. So we're starting to see a lot of these trends continuing, but also really growing within the industry sector. And as I said, the elephant in the room, as you see my next slide, is extended producer responsibility. So what EPR is essentially is really to look at how can you have a shared responsibility for end-of-life management for products placed into the market. The most common ones that people are aware of, carpet, used oil, tires, things of this nature, where the manufacturers have a share of the responsibility, meaning they pay for the share, which they pass on to the consumers. We're starting to see more and more state legislatures really taking a look at how are they going to implement this type of a program. And it's gone beyond what we consider product-based programs. So, you know, the bottle bills, paint care, real product-based activities into packaging and printed materials. Now, if you think about the concept of printed materials, what is a printed material? It's everything I just talked about. It's all your signage, it's your banners, it's everything that they're looking at, that if you are putting into the waste stream, they want you to pay, the producer to pay a portion of the cost of dealing with that end of life, be it a recycled content. And so we're starting to really have these dialogues with the state legislatures as to what are you looking for? How can we move forward? And how can we ensure that the industry is not necessarily penalized for producing these materials? Because we do recognize that the printing industry, as you see on the next slide, when you start looking at what's the big deal for printing, you know, how does this impact us? Because we're not the owner of the package. We produce and print the package, but we're not necessarily the owner of the package. So how is that going to impact the printing industry? What is the final ramifications when you go down the supply chain? Is it going to increase our costs? Are we going to be able to pass that on to our customer? Or is the ultimate producer of that package or printed material going to have to pass it on to the consumer? These are all these questions that are still out there that we're a little fuzzy over and really concerned about the direction that it's moving in, because we're not quite sure what states are going to include, if they're going to just include printed books, are they including magazines, are they included any printed matter, is it only paper, are we looking at anything on a plastic substrate, vinyl, and when I say plastic, that's a really generic term for me, and are they looking at vinyl substrates? What, you know, is that going to impact the banners that we're producing, the retail signage? At this point, we're unclear. So we're really looking at and working with the legislatures to ensure that the definitions are narrow and that they are not going to be impacting the industry to a large degree. And now we have the regulatory landscape. Yeah, new administration. It's going to be interesting. So we've already been reading all the articles that we have that the Biden administration will be rolling back a lot of the environmental regulations that the Trump administration put in place. We're following to see how's that going to impact the printing industry. We do also hear that a lot of the rules that were enacted and finalized through the Trump administration that had been proposed through President Obama's second administration, they may be rolled back or they may be amended. The only caution I would have is that if it is a final rule, they still do have to go through notice and comment. So it's going to be an interesting first year, I imagine. And the same with safety and health. You know, we are starting to see that a lot of states are developing their own specific workplace safety standards addressing COVID-19 in the workplace. OSHA to this point has declined to issue an emergency standard, saying that their current standards already are well enough and do cover COVID-19 exposures in the workplace. But we are starting to see that, you know, Michigan has one, New Jersey has an executive order, California just released its COVID standard. Virginia's had one in place since October. Oregon has one in place. So we're starting to see that either through executive orders or through the development of emergency standards, they're all putting these programs in place. So what is that going to look like down the road, and what happens when these standards expire? And will they extend them? So we do see that a lot of these safety and health issues in the workplace over the next 12 months are really going to be focused on activities associated with COVID-19 in the workplace. And then my final words, and I was excited to catch the tail end of the last session, was on sustainability. Because I do agree with the panelists from the earlier conversation that sustainability is here. It's not going anywhere. And I also agree that our print customers and our suppliers, that it's not just the product. It is now more, what is that company doing? How are they validating what they're doing within their organization to create a better environment and to create a more sustainable environment? What are they doing to reduce their overall environmental footprint? And environmental is that broad term. So we are starting to see more and more interest on the part of our brand customers for our certification program within the printing industry, which is the Sustainable Green Printing Partnership Program. We're starting to see that they not only want to know what products we're printing on, which is important, but they want to know, what is that company doing? And most importantly, how is that company validating and tracking what they're doing? It's key. It is not just enough to provide a product anymore. It isn't. You really do need to show your commitment to becoming that true partner in a company's sustainability journey. So I do agree that sustainability is here to stay. I think it became stronger over the pandemic. We heard more and more about the supply chain resiliency on the part of a sustainable business. So I really am excited that we're going to be able to continue to work together as we move forward down this particular pathway. And with that, Jay, I turn it back to you. There's my contact information. I appreciate the opportunity to share, and I look forward to our continued dialogue and conversations.
Excellent. Thank you, Marci. It was really interesting to hear about how the industry pivoted and adapted to the changing conditions to, kind of stay viable. It's certainly something we've all had to deal with this year. So we have a couple minutes for questions from the audience. So go ahead and use the Q&A feature. I'm not sure if Dean, I guess Dean maybe had to leave us. So Marci,
Sure.
I'm going to start with you with a question. So you mentioned extended producer responsibility. Do you have any opinions on that you'd like to share on what the future of EPR holds? And does your association have a position?
Well, we're still in the process of developing a position, only because we are starting to see that the discussion on EPR is evolving. At one point, it was simply focusing primarily on packaging and packaging waste. And now we're starting to see the conversation expand into printed materials. So we have to take a look to see what is the overarching issues associated with the inclusion of printed materials into that, because that has a much more direct impact on the industry than packaging. Packaging, yes, it's important, but it's also looking at, we're still the, one of the cogs in the supply chain. So it's not just looking at the substrates, and it's not just looking at the inks, but the ink substrate compatibility. It's looking at the materials they want to use. And then when you expand that into a discussion on printed matter and printed materials, we've had such as the state of Maryland that was looking at printed materials all except for bound books. Well, oh my goodness. Katie bar the door, that opens up a really broad discussion on what that would include. And it's interesting because as you see and hear about states that are really having issues with their funding mechanisms, and they're looking for ways to raise funds, the EPR scheme is one of those mechanisms that they can use to raise fees to both increase their infrastructure, but also to increase we look at it as a tax. They call it a user fee on the ability to put your materials into their market space. So we're still in the process of analyzing. We haven't had a really full-blown discussion on our position. Right now, I would say we're opposed to EPR in its current format, and then we just need to take a look to see what the real ramifications will be.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I guess we're bumping up against the time clock here.
Yeah.
So Marci, some great information you shared with us today. And so thank you to you and to Dean. We really appreciate you being here with us
Well,
today.
thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.